So, Rona, let's come back to right now, this moment. You are blossoming right now, and I'm just wondering, how flowers, they start with a seed, and then slowly there's a sprout, and then there's a little bud, and what's the bud of your life right
Well, I think now that I feel like I have myself back after having left being an executive director and doing creative work still with the radio show, I've been venturing into something I've wanted to do for a long time, and that's writing. So, when I do the radio show, I write every week to do my intro, and I write articles for newspapers and magazines, but I've wanted to write a book, and I haven't had time, kids, grandkids, the show. But I decided this year that it's time to write a book. And I have a topic, and it's related to parents and the stress that they're under. And what I've been noticing is the barriers. But I want to say I have an introductory chapter, and I have the outline.
now?
And I hired a writing coach. And she's available to me whenever I need her. And she takes my words and just says to me, let's just tweak this a little and edit this a little. But Rona, you're doing great. So it's perfect. But I also noticed the last few weeks I haven't written. So I've been trying to understand what my resistance is. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that I had learning disabilities when I was young, a form of dyslexia. But back in the day, I'm 63, so back then no one talked about learning differences. Nothing was ever identified. And I couldn't spell well. I couldn't read well. I had trouble with language. And the strangest part was that I felt like there was something wrong, but I couldn't figure out what it was. But I just figured I wasn't very smart. And that I saw kids learning to read easily, and I thought, well, I guess I'm just not very smart. I was a late talker, believe it or not. I've made up for it now.
You were storing up.
I was storing up, that's right. And all of a sudden, in 6th grade, we had to take what's called an SP test. It was called Special Progress. And if you got a certain IQ over a certain amount, you got skipped the 8th grade. So you went from 7th grade to 9th grade.
Right.
Well, everyone was stressing over this test, and I wasn't, because I knew I wasn't going to do well. And they give out the notices, and I am one of the people who have a high IQ. And everyone was surprised, and I was surprised. So they skipped me. I had to skip 8th grade, which put me back even more in terms of my learning. I really struggled. And so I grew up, I think until about age 40. I thought that I just wasn't very smart. So I went into nursing because I could get into Brooklyn College in the nursing department, but I couldn't get in with my friends in the regular department. And they had an accelerated program. So here I was just 16 when I graduated high school. I went to a 2-year nursing program, accelerated. So I was a nurse at 18. And so I went into that practical world that I loved, hands-on, helping people. But the part of me that thought I was dumb stayed. And it wasn't until I met my current husband, Nick, we're together 30 years now, he's my second husband. One of the first things he said to me, he said, Rona, you're one of the smartest women I've ever met. And I was like, what? And it was the best line ever, but he meant it, But I realized that as I go to write, all kinds of things come up. And I think it's fear, but it's also shame. I think when you're humiliated as a child, I had to stand up every time I spelled a word wrong. When we had spelling tests, I don't know if you had spelling tests. You had a pre-test and a post-test or whatever they called it.
Yeah, I don't remember ever having to stand up.
Every time you spelled a word wrong, you had to stand up. So I think I had so many layers of shame, and I think people have shame about many things. And what shame does is it's another one of those things that keep you down. And what I'm beginning in this blossoming time of mine to realize is that self-compassion, self-love, is the antidote to shame. And that there's nothing to be ashamed of in terms of how my brain works and my neurodiversity, and I had to learn to be very perceptive. Since I couldn't learn the same way, I had to figure out how to learn things differently. And that's been a gift of mine, being perceptive and using that in my intuition.
Yeah.
But the shame is what I've had to work on letting go of. And I think the writing is one of the tools for me to work on that. And I think it's taking longer than it might, because there's this process. So you step out and you do something courageous, and then you have to kind of go back and work on some stuff, and then you step out again and do it. So I think it's very true for any person listening, and for moms especially, if you've been working on this process of being a good mom or dad, and it's hard. We feel, I'm sure you felt this way, like very insecure. Like, how do I know how to do this?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's a whole new learning. So there's a lot of time spent trying to figure out how to be competent, or at least somewhat confident in your parenting. And then there needs to be some room for something else. And I don't think I had a lot of room. In the years that I was raising my kids, I don't think I made a lot of room, except for some spiritual work that I did do. I was in a group for many years, and some of that was good, and some of it wasn't so good. So I feel like if I was to do this over again, if I know now what I know, and if I had, if I could have done something differently, I think I would have carved out more time to just be able to sit with myself and try things, whether it's art or dance or writing. Just try things that feel a little uncomfortable, but give me such gifts. Like trying to write is a gift, even though it makes me uncomfortable. And I know in your art you must feel that way too sometimes.
Always.
Always.
Yeah, no, it's a part of the creative process. We start out, we have to take risks, and we enter a process that we then have absolutely no control over, and we end up in places that bring up all kinds of feelings, and it's the unknown.
Rosy, you talk about the creative process and that there's always this unknown. And I think that's why I've been afraid of that. I've wanted to draw and paint, and I haven't. My husband even bought me paints one year for my birthday, and they're still in my closet, and the blank canvas. I was a dancer back in high school, and then I just stopped. There have been so many things I think that I've avoided, in part because not knowing makes me uncomfortable because of my own fear. And I think people can relate to this. It's like you can be busy and organized, and again, raising 4 kids over a span of 38 years. My oldest son is in his 40s and the youngest is in her 20s. And, I had kids at home for a long time. I think part of that busy life, which I love my life. All the ups and downs and the mistakes, I feel so blessed to have the life I've had. But I think I've also avoided that unknown with little hints and little times when it comes in. And I think that's where, I met you in a meditation class. And to me, that's part of the blossoming, is to find that space to be quiet, whether it's with a computer and trying to write, or meditating, or walking. I did a silent retreat recently, and I would love to encourage mothers and fathers of young children to tolerate that time of not knowing. And it's very hard when you're not getting enough sleep and you have too much on your mind. I remember going off by myself I was just remembering to like Arizona and New Mexico for a trip by myself after my divorce. I'd never done anything by myself like that. How powerful that was. And a little scary. Yeah. A little scary. But so for me, in current time, the blossoming is about trying to write, spending time with my grandson who happens to live real nearby, and trying to find time to travel to see my other grandson, and reconnecting with, I think, both my power and my sense of service and some of my sadness, and also my concern for the world, and really thinking about what's my place during this time when things feel like there's a lot of falling apart, and a lot of us who need to step forward, and yet sometimes it's not clear how to do that.
Both that it's not always clear how to do it, that's the unknown piece, and then all of the fears that come up around you doing that, stepping forward in a new way, because you've been kind of out there, you've been in the public field for a long time, but it seems like you're being called to come out even more, like to open up even more, to expose parts of yourselves that maybe you haven't shared before in the world.
And I'm not sure exactly how to do that.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, because there's so much, I feel like I've gained such knowledge in my life, and there's a lot I know how to do. And it's so interesting to have that time when I'm not sure what to do. And I think it's, when I look back to the 10 years from having the idea of the radio show to actually having the radio show, during those 10 years I was gaining skills. And life experience. And I feel right now I need to keep open, and I'm asking people I know to come forth and tell me when there's a salon at someone's house or an event. My son works for truthout.org, and I'm reading his posts about the current state of affairs. I certainly don't want to run for office, I know that. But I know there's a place for me to do more work. But I don't know yet what that is. And I think I can tolerate it for a little longer anyway, for a little bit longer.